I just wanted my disabled nephew to access my home. But when our HOA president stole his wheelchair ramp and tried to fine me into silence, she triggered a chain of events that would expose her darkest secrets and end her reign for good. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. I share real stories like this every day. Leave a like if you believe in standing up for what's right, and stick around until the end, because justice doesn't always knock, it kicks the door in. I never imagined I'd become the person who finally took down Karen Matthews. For 3 years, she ruled Whispering Pines like a self-appointed monarch, her power concentrated in a clipboard and a smug smile. She didn't just enforce the HOA bylaws, she weaponized them. Grass half an inch too tall? Violation. A mailbox painted in a slightly different shade of eggshell? Another fine. She treated regulations like scripture, and any deviation as a personal affront. I avoided trouble for the most part, until my sister and her family moved in with me temporarily. My nephew Ethan is 11, brilliant, and determined, and he uses a wheelchair due to cerebral palsy. On their first day in my home, we set up a simple aluminum ramp over the 2 steps to my front door. It wasn't permanent, just a temporary fix so Ethan could come and go without needing help. It wasn't fancy, just functional. I didn't think twice about it. The doorbell rang at 7:30 the very next morning. Karen. Her platinum bob looked like it had been freshly ironed, and her sunglasses sat perched like a crown on her head. That damned clipboard was clutched against her chest like armor. "Good morning," she said, her tone as cold as the look in her eyes. "I noticed an unapproved modification to your property." I blinked, still trying to shake off sleep. "What?" "The ramp," she said, gesturing with a manicured finger. "It's not listed under approved front entrance structures. Article 7, Section 12. All exterior changes must be reviewed and approved by the Architectural Committee. I'll need you to remove it immediately." I paused, holding back the irritation rising in my throat. "Karen, it's temporary. My nephew, he's disabled. He needs that ramp to access the house." She flipped through her papers. "I see no accommodation requests filed. You'll need to submit Form 34B, include architectural drawings, material samples, and a physician's note. The next committee meeting is in 3 weeks." I stared at her. "He needs to get in and out now. You're talking about a kid in a wheelchair, not a gazebo." Karen didn't flinch. "The HOA bylaws take precedence. You have 48 hours to remove the structure or you'll be fined $50 per day." And just like that, she turned and left. I stood there in stunned silence. I had always known Karen was petty, but this was heartless. That day, I dug through everything I could find about ADA laws. Turns out she was full of it. The Americans with Disabilities Act applied to HOAs just as much as to anyone else. The bylaws didn't override federal law. I printed everything out, wrote a firm but polite note, and left it in her mailbox explaining that the ramp was legal and necessary, and that I'd be happy to talk if she had concerns. The next day, I came home to find a notice taped to my door. A fine. $200. The offense? Nuisance correspondence in a non-approved receptacle. Apparently, Karen considered my legal documents a violation of mailbox decorum. I laughed. At first. But that laughter wouldn't last. Because what came next? That's when things truly spiraled out of control. Saturday morning, I was flipping pancakes when Ethan rolled into the kitchen, his face streaked with tears. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen him cry since the day he fell out of his chair at school and laughed it off. But now, he looked crushed. "Uncle James," he choked out, "someone took my ramp. I can't go outside." I froze. I rushed to the front door. Gone. The ramp was just gone. Not moved. Not stored. Vanished. I scanned the front yard, the street. Neighborhood kids were out, playing hockey like they did every weekend. Ethan had been talking about it all week, just watching, not even playing. That was enough for him. And now, he couldn't even do that. I was furious. I carried him outside myself and set him in a chair at the edge of the lawn, where he could still see the game. His shoulders were slumped, though. His usual spark was dim. I didn't need to play detective. I knew exactly who had done it. I stormed across the cul-de-sac to Karen's house. Her colonial looked like it belonged in a magazine. White shutters, trimmed hedges, not a leaf out of place. I rang the bell. Once. Twice. A third time. She answered in a tennis skirt, holding a racket I'm certain had never touched a court. "Where's the ramp?" I demanded. No pleasantries. Karen arched an eyebrow. "I had it removed. It was in violation of Section 23, Unauthorized Structures and HOA Remediation Rights. You were notified." "That ramp was my property," I snapped. "You had no right." "Where is it?" She crossed her arms like I was a misbehaving teenager. "The non-compliant item has been disposed of. If you continue this aggressive tone, I'll report you for creating a hostile neighborhood environment. That carries a $500 fine." I took a breath, trying not to lose it. "Karen, that ramp cost me over $800. More importantly, it was there for a disabled child. Your actions weren't just cruel, they were illegal. I'm simply upholding the standards of this community," she replied, like she was doing me a favor. "Perhaps next time, you'll follow the correct procedures." That was it. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of her smug, unbothered face. "What are you doing?" she barked, her composure cracking for the first time. "Documenting the person responsible for theft and destruction of federally protected medical equipment. The police will appreciate the visual." "You can't prove anything," she called after me as I walked away. "The police don't care about HOA matters." She was right, partially. I wasn't going to the local precinct with this. Not yet. Back home, I called an attorney I'd found who specialized in ADA violations. After I described what happened, there was a pause on the other end, then a slow, incredulous laugh. "This is open and shut," he said. "Destruction of mobility equipment? Denial of accessibility? You've got theft, ADA violations, probably a civil rights angle too. We're going to make an example out of her." That Monday, I didn't go to work. At exactly 9 a.m., Karen Matthews received a certified letter from my lawyer. It outlined every federal law she had broken and warned of pending legal action. At the same time, I filed a police report for theft and destruction of medical equipment. By noon, something unexpected happened, something I hadn't anticipated. 3 other families came forward. Each had a story. Each one involved Karen. Each one centered around her punishing a neighbor for having a medical need. And suddenly, it wasn't just about me and Ethan anymore. That afternoon, Karen tried to get ahead of the fallout. She called an emergency HOA meeting for that evening. Usually, these things were ghost towns. Maybe 5 people showed up, tops, mostly the same folks who nodded at everything she said. But that night, nearly the whole neighborhood came. Word had spread. The community center buzzed with tension. People whispered in clumps, casting glances toward the front of the room where Karen stood, flushed and fidgeting, gripping a stack of printed bylaws like a lifeline. She started speaking before the meeting was officially called to order. "We have a resident," she said, her eyes landing on me like darts, "who is attempting to bypass proper HOA procedure under the guise of special exemptions. If we allow one unauthorized ramp, what's next? Neon paint jobs? Backyard sheds? Chaos?" It was absurd. A child's medical ramp framed as a slippery slope to suburban anarchy. When she finished her little tirade, I stood up. My hands weren't shaking, but my heart was pounding. "I'd like to address the board," I said calmly, "about the destruction and theft of federally protected medical equipment taken from my property by the HOA president." The room went silent. Karen's face lost all its manufactured warmth. "That's a lie," she snapped. "The HOA has full remediation rights. We followed the bylaws." I pulled out my phone. "I have footage," I said, bluffing, but she didn't know that. Saturday morning, 6:15 a.m., Karen and the maintenance worker removing the ramp from my front steps. No notice. No warning. No legal justification. A flicker of panic crossed her face. I also have ADA documentation, a receipt proving ownership of the ramp, and statements from 3 licensed physicians verifying the medical necessity of the structure. Not to mention the emotional impact this had on my nephew, who now can't leave the house without being carried. You could hear a pin drop. Karen's allies stared at their shoes. No one spoke. I could tell her power was slipping, no longer queen of the court, just another angry woman with a gavel and a god complex. Then something happened that cracked the whole facade wide open. A woman in the back stood up. "Karen fined me last year for putting a sensory swing in my backyard," she said, her voice trembling. "My son has autism. The swing calms him. She called it an unsightly structure." Another hand went up. An older man, voice raspy but clear. "I installed a railing next to my garden path after my hip replacement. She made me tear it out. Said it didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic." More voices. More stories. One after another. Karen kept banging the gavel, demanding order, but no one was listening to her anymore. The maintenance guy, same one who helped her remove the ramp, approached the front slowly. His face pale. "For the record," he said into the mic, "Ms. Matthews told me to take the ramp to the landfill. Said it was abandoned junk and not to ask questions." He turned toward me. "I didn't know it was for a kid. I swear." That was it. The mask was off. Karen had lost them. All of them. She tried to defend herself. Something about miscommunication, about just enforcing rules, about keeping the neighborhood looking nice. But no one was buying it. Her voice cracked. Her hands shook. For once, the clipboard didn't give her power, it just made her look small. And I wasn't done. "Tomorrow," I said, "the district attorney's office will receive all relevant documentation. We're pursuing charges: theft, destruction of medical equipment, violation of the ADA, civil rights violations under color of authority. And we're not alone anymore." Karen didn't respond. She couldn't. Because this time, she had no rule, no bylaw, and no power to hide behind. The next 2 days were a blur. Phone calls. Paperwork. Statements collected from neighbors. My lawyer worked like a machine, each document, each testimony, adding weight to the case. And Karen? She didn't show her face. Not once. Her fortress of a house stayed dark, curtains drawn. For the first time since I moved to Whispering Pines, her SUV didn't crawl the streets with that clipboard of doom. Then came Wednesday morning. I was in the yard, screwing in bolts for Ethan's new ramp, this one wider, sturdier, and bolted directly into the concrete, when I saw the black and white cruiser roll down the street. It didn't turn into my driveway. It kept going. And parked in front of Karen's house. 2 uniformed officers stepped out. Calm. Professional. They rang her doorbell like they'd done it 100 times. A full minute passed before the door creaked open. Karen appeared, her perfect blonde bob now frizzed and uneven. She was wearing a wrinkled pantsuit that looked slept in. No clipboard in sight. They spoke for a few minutes, calmly, almost casually. Then, to the shock of every neighbor who had peeked through blinds or stepped out pretending to check the mail, they escorted her to the patrol car. Not in handcuffs. But she wasn't in control either. She didn't even try to make eye contact with anyone. By noon, my phone rang. It was the district attorney's office. Karen Matthews had officially been charged with multiple violations: theft of property exceeding $500, destruction of federally protected medical equipment, interference with a disabled individual's accessibility, and civil rights violations under color of authority. Because she had used her position of power as HOA president to carry out these acts, the charges were aggravated. She was facing up to 3 years in prison, plus fines totaling more than $100,000. But the DA was willing to offer a plea deal. 6 months of house arrest. 5 years probation. Full financial restitution, not only for the ramp but for emotional damages. 200 hours of community service, specifically working with disabled individuals. And perhaps the final blow, a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board, anywhere in the state. I didn't dance. I didn't cheer. But I did smile. Not out of revenge, but because, for once, someone like Karen was being held accountable. That evening, I helped Ethan up the new ramp. He beamed. "It's even better than the last one," he said. I ruffled his hair. "No one's taking this one, buddy. I promise." And then we saw her. Karen pulled into her driveway in a different car, no more Lexus. Her hair was still a mess, makeup smudged, eyes ringed with exhaustion. She stepped out and froze when she saw us. No words. No threats. Just rage and humiliation. She opened her trunk and yanked out a "for sale" sign, walked straight to her front lawn and jammed it into the grass so hard the stake cracked. The Queen of Whispering Pines had officially surrendered her castle. But the moment that stayed with me was what came next. She looked up. Her eyes met mine. And I saw something I never thought I'd see from Karen Matthews. Fear. She wasn't just embarrassed. She wasn't just angry. She was afraid. Because for the first time, she had learned a truth she'd spent years ignoring. The rules she enforced so ruthlessly actually applied to her too. And that terrified her. The sign stayed in Karen's yard for weeks. I'd see her sometimes, peeking through the curtains like a ghost haunting the house she used to command. No more morning patrols. No more violation slips tucked under wipers. The clipboard, her old symbol of power, was never seen again. Neighbors who once feared her started talking to each other more freely. It was like the whole street had been holding its breath for years, and now we could finally exhale. The lawns didn't look less tidy. The mailboxes weren't suddenly neon. But the air had shifted, less brittle, more human. I didn't expect what happened next. One by one, people started dropping by. Some brought cookies. Others brought apology notes. A few came with stories, things they hadn't dared say before. A woman with lupus, fined for having a sunshade over her porch because it disrupted the visual harmony. A veteran, cited for installing a handrail by his front door after knee surgery. A couple who were warned for putting up a Halloween ramp for their daughter's costume party, just a few inches too wide. They all thought they were alone. Turns out we were all just waiting for someone to push back. Ethan went back to smiling more. His mom told me he'd started talking about when we build the next ramp, as if planning little engineering marvels had become his new passion. He even made a tiny model of our new one for a school project. And Karen? She didn't last long. A real estate agent showed up, discreet but efficient. Within a month, her house was listed. The HOA board, once her echo chamber, held a special election. This time, the community came out in droves. We elected people who actually listened. Who understood that rules are supposed to serve the people who live under them, not control them. At the new board's first meeting, I was asked to speak. I stood at the same podium Karen had once claimed like a throne. I didn't want any of this, I told them. I just wanted my nephew to be able to get through the front door. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was respect. Afterward, one of the board members approached me, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes. "You know," he said, "the way you handled this, it changed things. You gave people their voice back." I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just tired of watching people get stepped on, and told it was their fault for not ducking low enough. Weeks passed. One night, just before sunset, I saw Karen's car pull away from her driveway for the last time. She didn't look at me. Didn't wave. But I watched her go, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction. Closure. And when I turned around, Ethan was there on the porch, watching me quietly. "She's gone?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "She's gone." He nodded once and rolled toward the ramp, giving it a tap with his hand like it was a trophy. We stood there for a moment, him at the top of the ramp, me beside him, as the sky turned gold and the street behind us fell silent. Not just a neighborhood anymore. A community. And sometimes, all it takes to break down a tyrant is one little ramp, and the courage to say, "No more." What would you have done if someone stole your nephew's wheelchair ramp? Let's talk about HOA abuse, disability rights, and standing your ground. Backhand index pointing down, and if this story made you feel anything, don't miss the next one. Hit that bell and check out the next episode in the playlist.